by the opposition, controlled by the opposition. Doctor.
What we should be thinking now, we should be thinking beyond Kenya. The question out there now should be, are you thinking what I'm thinking? This wave is likely to spread around the whole of Africa. Malawi, Uganda, Zimbabwe, the rest of those people. In fact, there was a film I was watching somewhere in TikTok. And it's like those two people were conversing. That somebody like Museveni has stayed over 60 years in power. What is he doing? That when we are done with Kenya, we may have to move to that place. You see, what we should be looking at now, Kenya, as the face of courage, they have done so wonderfully well. Because African leaders have stolen and snatched away the resources that even in generations to come is supposed to be more than enough. So the vital issue now is not just even Kenya. And they've declared that until the whole government officials resign and retire, they are not leaving the streets. I'm not a prophet of doom.
Is that not an indication that the opposition could be behind this? If initially you are fighting, the hike in taxes, increment in certain levies, and that has been reversed.
No. It's not, the opposition may not totally be against it. If you watch one attitude that those young Kenyans showed, there was no looting. What they were damaging were things they felt belonged directly to the government. Or those individuals, which some people will look at and say, those are infrastructure. Infrastructure should be something like hospital, schools, not flashy cars that are bought by politicians, not buildings that politicians have stacked money and kept. So if you look at it, it's a kind of operation totality from grassroots. And for them as dedicated vindicators, you don't need anybody to pontificate to them that what they are doing is correct. That's why the whole parliament was taken over. And you see the leaders. It's like what happened in Burkina Faso, where the bully was bullied. And when you see a true leader, you know, look at what Traore is doing. 30% of salaries of ministers cut. 50% of salaries of workers increased. That is what leadership should be. So I don't totally agree that there is. Those people, they don't buy bread or gari or rice cheaper in the distance. They accept the few government officials, those in parliament, which they are fighting.
Well, the possibility of escalation of this crisis and it spreading beyond Kenya is of concern now. It's believed that many African countries, especially the citizens, are very tolerant. They've been experiencing bad governance over the years, decades, but we've not really seen many unrest, major ones, that could have prompted change in government, aside the Arab Spring. Can we have a repeat of that? Is the potential there, even though we don't pray for that?
Well, except there is foreign interference, we may not have it. Because these African leaders are wise in their orientation too. You know why? When Traore and the other guys struck in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, you know what happened? All the sit-type presidents, they began to change their military chiefs. Kagame did it. The man in Cameroon, Obia, did the same thing. You understand? And shortly after that, there was an attempt in Congo, you understand, a form of palace coup. And the man too was ousted. But it was his uncle, who is also a family man, that took over. So power didn't really change hand in that place. But that was the closest to what we have. But that happened around the elite class and the military. But this now is about the people. Yes, it has a tendency to turn into a spring, a sub-Saharan spring, if you may use that term. But the thing is, the leadership too, don't forget, our government to make a pronouncement, though still controversial, yesterday. They too have been reviewing what is going on in Kenya. And they understand that we have very similar situation on ground. Our own is even worse because you need to add banditry and insurgency to it. Of course, the rate of kidnapping too Kenyans do not suffer from all of that. You understand? Since Al-Shabaab have been tuned down, Kenya they are not having any terrorism or terror threat from anybody. And that is one of the reasons why you have that increase in their tourism. But Nigeria, we are even having zero tourism because the fear is out there. You go there, you get kidnapped. Who will pay your ransom? So that is there. And those are issues that we are dealing with. And of course, people are getting tired because terrorism and banditry has cut down almost by half our food production. You understand? And the government knows, look at, and the true policy of the government has raised inflation as well as food inflation. They need to do something to prevent a repeat or a spillover of whatever is happening in Kenya, in Nigeria, because some people are already beating the drums for that. So they know that they have to do something and take measures. Where in Nigeria, we can see the government doing that. I wouldn't know what is going on in places like Cameroon right now. You understand? Places like Congo DR right now. These are Uganda, like you mentioned. We don't know what is going on in those places as we speak. But over time, governments have, especially in Nigeria, have been so disconnected. In fact, we don't have leaders in Nigeria. What we have is rulers. And they govern with an oppressive mindset. And only that kind of measure, you can imagine when they are negotiating with workers for increment of salary, not until they begin to threaten strike, they will not respond. So when you have that kind of people at the hands of affairs, that is an open invitation. You cited a quote just now. You understand? Those who make peaceful change impossible. They are writing an open letter to violent change. It becomes inevitable. We don't wish for that. Just before I came to this studio, I was discussing around it, and I said, why people like me, who are privileged to speak on radio and everywhere, would not totally agree to it is because I know somehow, in my neighborhood, I'm seen as one of them. And whereas, in reality, I am not. So how do I defend myself? Do you understand what I'm saying here? So these are things that we know, and the leaders are aware. So they have prepared people like us as human shield to really take the hit for them while they escape. But the thing is, we don't have to. That is a wicked orientation and wicked way of thinking. Like I was speaking to Doctor while we were at the reception, that look at all of these people. They were comfortable before coming to government.
Right.
Why can't they just serve? Is it that difficult to do? Why can't they just serve the people? Because that is the oath you took, to serve. And you dead there and be ruling. That is wickedness. That's what the Kenyans are resisting. They stood against the white people, wanted to start ruling them, even after independence. The Mau uprising erupted, and they took the white people by surprise. Yes, it was very violent, but that passed the message across that, come, we need to leave these people alone. Let them govern themselves. So that is the country that we are talking about. So that legacy is there, and they will not take it from anybody.
Well, breaking loose from the shackles and the chains, the dungeon of these international institutions or some European countries that we really placed ourselves in, unfortunately so, requires some sacrifices from the people and government. And the government is saying that it must be homegrown solution. And it requires gestation period. You must pay the sacrifices. But hunger is persisting. And, you know, it's really pervasive. And that could snowball into another thing. Is there a communication gap in nations of Africa, especially Nigeria, so that we avert this looming crisis?
You see, the looming crisis may or may not be averted. You see, outside corruption, there is something that is higher than corruption, which Africans suffer, and that is poverty. See, poverty in Africa is walking on 4 legs. It's very stable. The center of gravity is very, very low, so you can't just push it up. And that has been used to weaponize the people. Even in elections. I remember something that happened during when we were in the university. We had to queue behind, A1 option, whatever. You queue behind somebody who probably you want to vote. The long queue was there. That man campaigned seriously. We were coppers and we said, this is the man we must vote for. That day came. We all lined behind that man. Very long queue. And when it was time to count, they brought money. They said, 1, 2, they moved that money to the other side. You know, they had 4 or 5 people on that line. We were around 30 something on the other line. So when they give 1, 2, 3, 4, they will do as if they want to give the 5th person. That is how that our line. People started crossing. People started crossing, and they all crossed. And the man with money won. Poverty is a very serious issue in Nigeria, and nothing can be suffered to support it other than to go against it. You see, the rich are making the poor to look as if they are not part of this generation. And if these haves do not take time, the have-nots will take them from them. They will take them away from them. It's not by force.
They have the belief of security fortification.
Security, but you see, did you see how the Kenyan parliamentarians were running? Some held their distance. They were running. Again, people differ. People differ. You see, what the Kenyan, there is no riot in Nigeria or strike the last 2 days because of the level of poverty. An average Nigerian gets what he eats.
And the government moves at suppressing the protesters forcefully in the process, as alleged, killing some people.
Killing some people. Apart from fear.
Deaths were recorded in Kenya too, but that didn't stop them.
Nigerians fear too much. Fear. Even my level of knowledge about animals is that when you push them to the wall, they fight back. But Nigerians, when you push them to the wall, they want to break that wall and keep running. And funny enough, even those who are in old age, those who are young, I saw something at the police station. A man that could be as old as 60, he came to the police station as a witness. He didn't commit any offense. And they asked him, sir, you were there when this thing happened. The DPO was asking him, he raised his hand and said, no, today, I know deal. Tomorrow, I know deal. Yesterday, I know deal. So they asked, where have you been then? He said he's inside and outside his house. Before you look at the shoes he was wearing, full of urine. Fear, fear, fear. If Nigerians can be bold, you see that even our leaders here, you think they don't have a heart? They see what will happen in Kenya. You can see how the bill cancelled, a lot of other things, reduced and removed. We are still talking about minimum wage. When a senator, if it is true, a housing allowance of 621,000 naira in a month, and we are talking about 100,000, 152, and say, no, it must be 62. What was 62?
Well, we are already bringing the conversation home, particularly to Nigeria. That's our country. We're so concerned at this time. Similar scenario when it comes to state of economy, perhaps higher even worse than Kenya. And some of these agitations in Kenya, or the advocacy for certain changes, has been on in this country for a while, and we've seen little done or nothing done in that regard. And now we're at a crossroad. What should be done so that we don't have this crisis escalate? And some are already drawing motivation from what is happening in Kenya, organizing protests, and there could be possible clampdown.
One thing with Nigeria is that over time, doctor said it, that poverty has been weaponized. It has been used as a weapon against the people. And that's why only those who are strong enough, because of that, a lot of people, hunger has weakened people. Personally, around me in the last month and the past few weeks, I've had people broken down of all manner of illness because what? There has been a reduction in their immune system. Mm. And that is across board. If I can have up to like 10 families affected around me, now, I don't know how many the next person has. You understand? That has affected us. Now, that strains to even shout, and the younger generation too. The poverty has also affected their own orientation to the extent that what has been passed down to them is corruption and lifestyle of fraud. An average 18-year-old wants to ride Jeep without working for it. How will he go about that? Is to go through Yahoo Yahoo. And there's a new one now, rituals. They call it Yahoo Plus. That is the order of the day. And when you look at our young generation, the age group of those protesting in Kenya, in Nigeria, their thinking is not to protest against any government. Their thinking is how to help themselves and to begin to also live large, just as the politicians are living. That is how messed up things are in Nigeria. And the politicians are feeding on it. The only group of people that could say yes are actually upright are those who are educated elites, who see the dangers that this thing could lead to, who understand why people are not protesting. He just talked about fear. I've mentioned another factor now. So these are things, and these are people because it is their making. They know it.
And then the protest comes majorly because people want to loot.
Exactly.
And enrich themselves. So.
I back that up with a testimony. During the fuel subsidy crisis of 2012 January, it lasted for about a week. In Ibadan here, my area, when we went hungry, we moved out. We were all boys. 6 of us went out to just look for something to cook in the house and eat. So we were fortunate to see a shop to buy some things, and we were coming with those items. And our colleagues in the neighborhood accosted us in the middle of our junction, saying, we are hungry, you want to go and be eating food, that we should drop the food. I realized what kind of thing is that? We were all protesting together here even yesterday. They were serious about it. They were going to lynch us until we also changed it for them. We dropped the food item, went and looked for sticks and other items that we could also handle. Okay, if that's the way you want it, then let us settle it once and before elderly people now came out of the house to say, no, do you want to be fighting each other, Danny? That is what happens when there is a protest in Nigeria. If NSAS can fail by virtue of infiltration, that is to tell you that yes. And that particular protest, when they will quash it, what happened? The leaders address the public. We are going on a break. We will come back on Monday. By Monday, what happened at the Freedom Park? Soldiers were already everywhere. So nobody could access the place again. So that conspiracy is there against the people. So that is where we have issues in Nigeria. But the thing is, everything has its own elastic limit. I don't pray we get there. Why I keep praying against is because I know I'm somehow in between. But it's not I'm afraid. I've led protests before. You understand? But the thing is, the leaders should be wary. The pronunciation of yesterday is an indication that they are wary. But those who are supposed to manage the event, like I said this morning, that's fine. Government has said we are going to cut duties. Customs should not start collecting money when government has said don't collect anything. Because at that point, I can personally incite violence against any custom officer because that will be an act of treason when you are going against what the constituted authority have said as a public servant. So these are things that we need to start doing as a nation. If we need to start holding leaders accountable, we need to make them understand that, you are not supposed to rule. You are supposed to lead. And leaders are supposed to show example. So if you are leading without showing example, then you are ruling, you are not leading.
Well, with the understanding that, Nigerians are tolerant, some other African countries' citizens are also tolerant, and, they may not have that mind to go on a protest, a violent one, or disrupt things. They care for themselves and their lives, too. Well, this complacency has been seen from both sides, and they believe that, look, we have the fortification of military powers and all of that. But can we really be so certain that violence may not erupt when we consider the situation at hand? Feel the pulse of the society, pervasive hunger and anger. It's like we have the dynamite explosive in court now, and you have fuel everywhere. You just require a crazy person to ignite the fire. Things are very terrible in this country as we speak.
There's one issue which is militating against that. It is psychophancy. On payroll of these people, there are chains and arrays, an army of psychophants. As a public affairs analyst, when we appear on program, there are feedback mechanisms. The moment you speak the truth to power, these sycophants will come at you with all manner of comment. And you begin to wonder, are we not suffering together, Danny? Do you understand? Now, if you go out to protest, those are the ones that will gather to do a counter-protest. That's why in every protest in Nigeria, you always have pro and against. The pro, the matters
And you could have
and those who are
religious, coloration to
They
rate,
will
ethnic
put
coloration, and so many other things.
So those are the problems that we are dealing with, and these are creations of the ruling class. And that is why, until everybody realizes that, we are all just pawn on their chessboard, we need to realize that and take our own destiny in our own hands. That is when we can defeat them. For now, best we can do is enlightenment, and that's what we are doing in the IT industry.
Well, let's stand these unequivocally. We are not in any way promoting violence or protest or unrest in Nigeria or any other part of the African continent. What we are just doing is dissect the issues at hand so that we can forestall a repeat of what is happening in Kenya. Well, Doctor, we have all these issues, but some will say it's not peculiar to the African continent. You have economies struggling across the globe, and they have different measures, taxation, ways at trying to have more money at the coffers of government for implementation of certain projects. Shouldn't we show understanding at this critical point, even on the African continent?
You see, if you look outside the African continent, they are also human beings. The same brain, the same physical body. But you see, there is an attitude. When I was speaking initially, I talked about country first before party. What is normal for everybody? What is normal for every member of the country? And they listen to the citizens. That is the major difference between African leaders and Nigeria in particular. I saw something in Denmark. There was a particular, maybe a law or something that was passed, and the people felt this is draconian. It wasn't so good for them. They didn't riot, they didn't do anything. You know what they did? Early in the morning, in that winter, they all came out with their blanket and everything. Maybe a road like Iwo Road, they will sit down. They go to another road like that, they sit down. The next day they come, they sat that way. Immediately, the government reversed it. If you move outside the shores of some of these countries that I'm talking about, there are things that have been made that we can also make. You meet an item at a particular price, you go back, especially if it has to do with food, shelter, and some other things. But we have a government in Africa where the moment somebody gets there and cannot pack everything there and be given, in bits to the other people, the person has not succeeded. The person has no road. You see, what is happening presently is better imagined than expressed. If anybody say, it used to be like that before. These days, if you watch critically, Sumbo can confirm what I'm saying. There is no longer anybody who is not in their camp. I mean the camp of the looters and, the corrupt people. There is no rich man again. It is the glory of Jehovah God that makes an ordinary man to appear big. Now, everybody is feeling this thing. It's no longer probably is at the other side. Nobody buys a Congo of rice cheaper than any other person. It's all like that. So the minority, I repeat, this minority class that is trying to torment, less than 1,000 people are trying to torment over 220 million Nigerians. One day, if these haves are not very careful, the have-nots may take it away from them.
Well, Doctor, on the African continent, a growing conversation gathering momentum, just a position between military regimes that we've witnessed in Africa compared to the civilians that are in power and how the people are fared under these administrations. And some are of the view that, look, perhaps we should have a homegrown model, a democratic model that suits the African region, or perhaps go back to military days, things were not as bad as these. And now in Kenya, the youths are calling for the resignation of not only the president, but other government officials. We don't know where that is panning through now. And if that could also, if that is a threat to the African democracy of many countries in Africa.
It could be a threat. But you see, even a military man is a human being. A military man is a human being. In Africa today, if you look at what is happening in Burkina Faso, he's a military chap and they are now proposing another 5 years for him. The Kaki and the whatever, the natives, it's not what is ruling. It is that milk of human kindness to lead your people. Sumbo was talking about leadership, not rulership. African leaders like to rule. They like to probably rule. They don't like to lead. So if where it suits, like in Burkina Faso now, you cannot tell them that they've not gotten what they want. If, look at, over 1,100 schools has been reopened in Burkina Faso. 5,600 and 500 people were not living in their homes. Before this man came back in September 2023, all of them are back homes. These are good developments. So it's not just who is leading, you appropriate money, and the money is carried away. If you know the quantum of money these people carry away. A Briton was telling me, he said, Dr. Anonya, he said, if Britain, in all her wealth, can spend money or waste money or loot money the way Nigerians do, he said Britain will go bankrupt. Even if you are EFCC, money is gathered. When money is gathered, the loot is looted again. Is that how it's supposed to be? We have more than enough. We have more than enough for this country. But it's not going around. And that is the issue. The rate at which, it's what the papers report that people see at times. People are dying. And as dedicated vindicators of this country, we don't need anybody to pontificate to us that there is the need, to have a lateral thinking. Our leaders always go on vertical thinking or horizontal thinking. But there is the need for anybody that will be our leader. It's not probably you've given somebody 10,000 naira, 5,000 naira, which you will use to suffer the next 4 years. There should be a lateral thinking.
Well, Doctor, let me come to you now, Mr. Sumbo Badijoko. He said dedicated vindicators. I wonder who those whom you are referring to, the protesters or those who are aggrieved and want some level of positive changes. But can the government be so complacent this time around by not showing leadership by example? Cut their course, especially in Nigeria, and show that Nigerians that you also feel their pains and we are in it together, and not that everything is to your own advantage alone because you have the privilege of being in power.
I told you they are monitoring the situation. And some of them would be advising Ruto too, because they know if Ruto falls, the question will be who will be next. You understand? Those who are proponents of protests in other countries are waiting to see where the Kenyan episode will end. It was not until Bouazizi stepped down in Tanzania that the spring moved to Egypt. It was not until Hosni Mubarak was defeated that the episode moved to Libya. Libya resisted, but Omar Gaddafi paid with his life. You understand? It was the intervention of Russia that saved Assad in Syria because it moved that. That's why they call it Arab Spring, not an African thing. So, the survival of Ruto, of this crisis, is to the advantage of other African leaders. They are monitoring closely. They know, especially in Nigeria, that the situation here too is so very tense. In fact, what the Kenyans were resisted, we have taken worse in this country. We have taken worse because just one subsidy removal is enough for us to take. But they added floating of currency. And that is what has made the price of items to go that high. And we are taking it. You understand what you're saying? So, development will happen. I don't pray Ruto falls because I kind of like his personality anyway. But the thing is, he needs to really do something about the situation there. And of course, African leaders that are left should learn. He says something which is very, very germane. It's not about the khaki or the agbada. You understand? Kagame does not wear khaki, for instance. Rwanda is being tagged to be the Singapore of Africa today. You understand? And the man is leading there. And of course, those who are wearing khaki, cutting down everything. And the man in Liberia just slashed his salary by 40%. So these are things. It's about leaders understanding that they are there to represent the interests of the people, and they must be there to serve the interests of the people.
Thank you so much. We've looked at the Kenya's democracy of engagement and lessons for the African continent on conversation today, on matters arising today. That has been our conversation. Thanks to you, Mr. Adesumbo Badijoko, a public affairs analyst, for your submission.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to you also, Dr. Fidelis Hanonye, international affairs analyst.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, the lion could claim to be the king of the jungle, but when the jungle is on fire, the lion would also be on the run. Some people are somewhere frustrated, pained to ignite the fire in the jungle. We should be wary of that. Thanks for watching Conversation. Till next time, have a pleasant day. Bye.